one of the players at my local gaming group has finally convinced me that Leela is actually worth even attempting to play. So I'm now making a tier 2 deck. This is definitely not something meant for competitive play. This is not so much an attempt at Leela as an attempt at making Switchblade work in Criminal. Leela just happened to be the ID I chose for this, as opposed to the rest. I'll talk on that more later. But basically, what this does is with a central breaker, with a core breaker suite, of Golden Blade, Corroder, and Switchblade, I break through servers easily, and that will get me the agendas that I need. I use Replicator because that is how you can find your silencers most efficiently. There is no better way to find it, and I think it's worth the 4 influence because it also thins your deck. So because I'm using Replicator, I'm using lots of hardware as well. So my deck is basically 40% hardware, 40% events, and 20% other stuff like the breakers. My opening hands are both very marginal. They don't contain any burst economy, so that's pretty bad. But my second hand at least contains a Replicator, and early Replicator is always good to see. That allows me to chain the rest of my hardware. However, this will leave me with very few credits because I do not have the supplier. I would much rather have the supplier to host the Replicator. Well, so in that case, I begin running very aggressively because he didn't play Hedge Fund. This is quite crucial. If your opponent doesn't play Hedge Fund, always run. So this will at least force them to think about raising the ice. And against Leela, that is a double dilemma, because if you don't raise your ice, you risk losing the ice, having it bounce back to your hand, because I get free access. I mean, I get to, because if I access in the event that I access an agenda, yeah. Alright, so he begins icing up R&D, and he has a remote, so I want to check the remote. It turns out to be an Eliza's toolbox. Now I can click for 1 credit and then trash it, but that's not worth it. I decide to let him have it. He can rest whatever he wants. I'll trash it the next turn, because he's not protecting the Eliza's toolbox. I'd rather force him to spend the 4 credits. That will make it not very worth it for him, because he has to spend 4 credits and 3 clicks. I don't want to just spend 4 credits like that. Credits are way too important for me. Unfortunately for me, he actually managed to get a 15 res ice res for the cost of 0. Yep, he's playing Yanis. So the next turn I was basically forced to click for credits and trash him. Tempo hit, but that had to be done, especially since I'm Leela Patel. I do not want cards to get rest. I want them to be unrest so I can bounce them away. So, so far my draws have been utterly horrible. I'm drawing into legworks that I cannot use. I'm drawing into emergency shutdown. I also can't use that. I love emergency shutdown in this scenario, but I have no way into HQ yet. I'd much rather see an inside job. Maybe I can do an inside job chain into an emergency shutdown. That would have worked. Unfortunately, the nature of this deck is that it is very, very dependent on draw order, and I'm getting hosed by it. Normally, it's not too much an issue for me, because if, say, I draw prepaid voice pads without replicators, at least I can get my events going. If I draw events without prepaid voice pad, at least I can get the events going, which means I'll have a very good early game. So they complement each other, but they are not necessary for this deck's operation. Unfortunately, I haven't been drawing any events at all. So, I cannot get anything done. My express delivery nets me 4 marginal cards. The supplier is the best late game choice, along with Katie Jones. Show Gamble and Bank Job are burst choices. I went with the late game. Seeing that he's HB, it's probably not a good idea that I'm contesting him late game, but I desperately needed economy at this point. So it was between Katie Jones and Show Gamble. Show Gamble could have paid off better in the short term, because I have 2 prepaid voice pads out and a third one coming. But in the end, I just decided to go with the KT and concede the first few agendas. Now, I must at this point mention that we both make a gross number of errors throughout this game. I'm not very familiar with this deck myself, and he is not a very experienced player either. So we both make a lot of mistakes, but I think that's what makes this video a good one to showcase, because I can actually talk about the mistakes. So just now you saw me there. I used special order to bring out my Corroder for 2 reasons. Firstly, I was using the 1 recurring credit for prepaid voice pad, so it was absolutely free. Secondly, I know that he's playing HB, so I don't have to worry about net brain damage. So I can safely keep the Corroder in my hand. Whereas against Jinteki PE, for example, I might want to keep my Corroder in my stack, where it's safe from that damage. So here I'm forced to discard a card. Very tough choice. I want all 6 cards in my hand. The emergency shutdown is a must because I know he's running so many big eyes. So I decided to trash the 3rd copy of Prepaid Voice Pad. Yeah, it is a little expensive to install Prepaid Voice Pad and it doesn't really pay off very well, but yeah, that could be something to change in this deck, but I want to make Replicator worth it, so I had to run Prepaid Voice Pad. So I continue charging up KT. She's pretty loaded now, and I don't have to worry about tags, which is a good thing. And here I'm forced to make another tough choice. In the end, I decide to trash the Femme Fatale. Alright, so he goes for another agenda, it seems, and he's getting uncontested. Yes, there's an upgrade in that server, so I'm really not too interested in running that server. And I know that he's running Big Byroid, so I really do not want to face check that server. Firstly, it will make him rest ice, which means that I cannot bounce that ice back off, and more importantly, he has enough credits to rest a Janus, and I definitely don't want to space plant to that. Taking 1 brain damage is very fatal, because I need every single card that I have in my hand right now. They are all too valuable for me to lose. So I use my special order once again. Since I found it, I might as well use it. And I decide to go for my Sentry Breaker because he hasn't shown a code gate yet. Whereas I see a Janus on the board. And more importantly, I need to protect myself from program trashing. That is incredibly important. HB is the faction where they have all the program trashing eyes, all the program trashing sentries, and I definitely do not want to get caught off guard by that. So Switchblade is a must. I can avoid program trashing for the most part, thanks to Pyroids. I can click through Ichi's 1 and 2 as long as I give myself enough clicks to do so. But just to be safe, I'm going to do my Switchblade first, and the silencer couldn't have come at a better time. Just as I got my Switchblade, the first silencer came, and this is why I want to play Replicator, even splash for it in Criminal. Because 1 Replicator on the board allows you to summon all 3 silencers in the span of 3 clicks. That is very powerful. And you definitely need all 3 silencers. Okay, for most games 2 silencers is enough, but against HB in particular, where they're running Genesis, 1 strength pump of Switchblade isn't enough. So this is the rationale behind my deck. So in the meantime, I've been playing Solitaire, so he has been playing Solitaire as well. He got a Grundle Refinery off, and now he's making progress with the next agenda, which looks to be a priority requisition. Or Wotan. Project Wotan would be pretty nasty, I must admit. In the meantime, yes, I continue drawing up and install my last silencer. By now, I've already hit KT because I needed to get my stuff installed. He placed a Biotic Label. Turns out that it was a bigger agenda. It wasn't just priority requisition, it was mandatory upgrades. Someone's in a lot of trouble. The longer I drag this game out, the more he will gain from it, so I need to make something happen right now. With 3 cards in his HQ, I decide to go for a blind legwork run and hope that it's not a code gate. If it's a code gate, at least I can click through it. I mean, if it's a Boyroid, I can click through it, but otherwise I'll be stopped cold. The blind legwork paid off, and I access 3 cards. All 3 cards in his hand are Heinlein Grid, very interesting choice. Biotic Labor and an NAPD contract. Thank goodness he was holding to an agenda. This is pretty important. Now I get to bounce and ice off. Speaking of which, you probably have realized by now that I haven't been triggering Leela's ability at all. I completely forgot that Leela's ability triggers on both Hop scores and runner steals. I thought it was only on runner steals. So I basically missed 2 whole chances at knocking off ice and upgrades from him. So that was a huge mistake from me. I could have definitely slowed him down a lot more if I remembered to trigger Leela's ability. So yeah, that was basically my biggest error the entire game. So following that legwork, I emergency shut down his Janus, and now I'm making a run through R&D, forcing him to res the Janus. I break through it with 3 silencer tokens, but a rotor turret stops me cold. I completely didn't see that coming. I was prepared for an Ichi 1 or 2, but the basic rotor turret has me covered, and as a result, I lose my Switchblade. I congratulate him in words, but inside I'm laughing away because I have a clone chip in my hand ready to play anytime. That will rescue my Switchblade, and this is why you need to run recursion or at least some form of redundancy in Criminal, because these kind of things can and will happen, these little mistakes, and you don't want them to cost you the entire game. Alright, so he plays Subliminal Messaging, which is working out pretty well so far. Oh, by the way, he's running Caprice Nice in this deck, as I realized when I ran his remotes. Yeah, that's something to be cautious about now. And that's a good thing, because I was basically able to run and trash at Caprice uncontested because he was down to 1 credit after rezzing the Rotor Turret. Alright, so yeah, he basically spends his next 4 clicks gaining credits, and that's how useful Mandatory Upgrades is. It allows him to recover from that huge loss in credits very nicely. So yes, I promptly bring out my clone chip and make an R&D run, bringing out my Switchblade. So this is once again going to prove very potent against him. Not only am I getting 1 card of access, but more importantly, this turns on my emergency shutdown, which I'm definitely going to use once again. I see the same old highline grid, but more importantly, Janus goes offline. So this opens up a lot of room for me to raid his R&D, because I know that it's completely porous. Alright, now it's back to him. He ices up HQ finally, but by now I don't really care about running into HQ anymore, because I run Sneak Door Beta in my deck. 1 copy of it still somewhere in my deck. So if I want to fetch agendas from his HQ, Sneak Door is my way in. HQ, it has too much ice at this point. So right now I'm going to take advantage of this scoring window. As long as there are no new ice on R&D, I'm just going to run there every turn, knowing that he cannot rest the Janus until he has at least 15 credits with him. Meanwhile, I'll just continue digging for cards, and hopefully I can find my Sneak Door in time to raid his HQ. On the same token, I'm also spending my time clicking for KT. By now, KT is also doing a very good job for me. Alright, now here's the problem. He installs Ice and an upgrade, which is presumably Caprice Nice, on R&D. It could be a Highline Grid as well. That would be pretty smart. Because if you remember, I access a Victor 1.0 of R&D. That is a code gate. I haven't found my code gate breaker yet. And if I click through the Victor, I might find myself completely drained of credits. So that is something I'm worried about. Therefore, I didn't run R&D. And if it turned out to be a Caprice Nice, it would be a waste of my time as well. So I decided not to run. In the meantime, he's recovering nicely. Now he has 14 credits. He can easily rest the Janus a turn from now. So I must decide right now. Do I run R&D, or do I not contest it and go for a building up my rig? I chose to build up my rig because this means that he cannot safely score from his remote. Following that, I continue banking KT. She's now at 18 credits. I have no fear for tags whatsoever because he's HB. This is a reason why tags are so important. Anyway, he continues on, and this is a very dirty combo. That completely screwed over my game. He was able to install and use Eliza's toolbox in the same turn, thanks to mandatory upgrades. I didn't see that coming, and that completely threw me off. So now I did things the only way I knew I could. Credit denial the hard way with a Count Siphon, and that forced him to res the Heimdall. It's not worth it in terms of credit gain for me. I had to pay 2 for the Wall of Static and 7 for the Heimdall. So the whole point here was not for me to gain credits, it was for him to lose credits. I needed to force him to lose as much traction as possible so that I could hopefully find my Sneak Door and score enough agendas to win before he does. So at this point, I'm about to siphon him. He contemplates whether to res that upgrade in the R&D or not. He chooses not to. And I go through with a siphon. And then I trash the toy box, because he has no credits left. So yeah, he basically went from 23 credits in 1 turn to 0. So that was good news for me. But the bad news is mandatory upgrades is still scored, so he still has the time to gain credits and trash KT in the same turn. That's a very good move from him. I'm not worried because I know I have another KE Jones in my stack, and I'm very flush on credits, and he's probably not running closer cards. So this huge amount of money should sustain me for some time to come. Not to mention that Switchblade is a very, very efficient sentry breaker. So in terms of spending money to break ice, I'm not that worried. His non-sentry ice are actually pretty small. The biggest I've seen so far is Victor 2.0, Victor 1.0. Sorry, Hadrian's, of course. Heimdall, sorry. Yes, his Heimdall is the biggest one that I've seen that I need 7 credits to trash. Now here he makes a very crucial error. His key card, which is Caprice Nisei, he chose to install it in that server when he only had 5 credits in his bank. You should never ever install Caprice when you cannot even afford to defend her. He even raised the Caprice for 2 credits and played the side game and easily lost. So that was a huge mistake on his part. I'll just bid 0 every time. It's like siphoning you for credits. So yes, he definitely shouldn't have put the Caprice in the remote until he was ready to defend it with his credit pool. It was safe in his HQ anyway, since I haven't found my snake door yet. So yes, that was a very big misplay he made there, and because of that, he now cannot secure his remote. I can still easily get into his remote. And now I draw into my snake door. I wanted to play it, but I wanted to get the maximum 3 runs out of it. So I decided to do something else instead, which was to install my R&D interfaces. And it was at this juncture that I realized I made a huge mistake. Earlier on, I discarded my Desperado, thinking that I didn't need the 1 recurring credit for each run because I wasn't going to make many runs. But now I realize I needed those credits. I mean, I needed Desperado not for the credits, but for the memory. I don't have enough memory to install the stick door, and I cannot afford to trash any of my 3 breakers. So I spent my next 2 clicks digging for the Desperado, and I couldn't find it. I checked my heap, and I realized that the last card in my heap was that Desperado. So, a huge mistake for me not to install the Desperado early on. When I had it in my hand, I chose to discard it instead, and now it's biting me in the butt. Yeah. So I had to click for 1 credit because I didn't want to trash any more of my cards in my hand. But it was too late because he had found 2 accelerated beta tests, and because of mandatory upgrades, he was able to fast advance them to win the game. So that was a very, very thrilling game, I must say. Even though it was mostly because we both made too many mistakes. Once again, you realize both agendas he's got, I didn't think to trigger Leela's ability. That would have changed nothing. Honestly, that wouldn't have changed anything. But the first 2 agendas definitely. Eroding his remote ice would have been huge. Taking his Yanas off the board would have tripled his tempo as well. As for this deck, as you can see, it definitely suffers in the early game, especially when you don't draw your events. I basically drew every single card in the wrong order. To make things worse, what I ended up doing was I was drawing manually from the deck because I had too few credits to install the hardware that I already had in my hand. I had a prepaid voice pad and I basically had a prepaid voice pad in my hand. I didn't install it because I was too poor, and then I just kept manually drawing, hoping to find a sure gamble or something, but I ended up drawing into my last copy of prepaid voice pad instead, when I should have been tutoring it with Replicator to thin out my deck. So yeah, my draws were very inefficient and very unlucky indeed. I guess it all boils down to the inconsistency of this deck, which is why it will never be a tier 1 deck, but it's still pretty fun to play nevertheless. I'll give this another shot in the future. Thanks for watching. Happy net running. Goodbye.